You're listening to Better Live Than Dead on the Gear Radio Network.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode number 6 of the BLTD Extracast. Now, as you may know, we have the BLTD podcast, but this is an Extracast, just a conversation. We're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about some things, and we've got a good guy to talk to today. You may know him. He was on one of the infant BLTD podcasts. Paul Waggoner, guitarist from Between the Baird and Me. Now, if you give me just a second before I bring Paul in, I'm going to tell you about all the cool stuff he's doing. First off, he's got his Necessary Roughness blog talking about National Football League over at metalsucks.net. You can follow him on Twitter at Paul BTBAM. Check out his coffee roasting business, parliamentcoffeeroasters.com. Also, if you're interested in the music part of it, Paul is going back on tour starting this Wednesday, the 18th. You can check out tour dates at betweenthebairdandme.com. Now that I have that all out of the way, Paul, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to be back.
Glad to have you back. And by the way, I want to say congratulations because you are officially, I've done this, I've dubbed you the BLTD music correspondent.
Oh, that's great. I've always wanted to be a correspondent.
Solely because there will be a question I want to finish the podcast off with, not relating to you, not relating to your band, but relating to music. So therefore, You can be the music correspondent.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. Could I be senior music correspondent?
You know what? You can be the senior music correspondent. I will write that down now, and I'll make sure when I post the podcast that I put down BLTD Music's senior music correspondent.
Thank you.
Paul
yes,
Waggoner.
that would look good
Absolutely.
on my resume, and so it has a lot more clout to it.
I'm glad I can help you, and I will gladly give you a very positive reference as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. Now, starting off the podcast, I have to apologize to you. I have a sincere apology. I hope you accept it. Back on September 3rd, I tweeted about our football preview, the BLTD podcast between myself and my buddy Lewis, who we do the podcast with every week. We talked about football, and you said, I'll only listen if you promise me you pick the Panthers to win the Super Bowl with an undefeated record. I responded and said, I did not do that. Please don't be mad. I don't think the Panthers are going to be good. So I apologize.
Okay. Yes. I'm going to accept your apology, but I'm still a little perturbed that you would underestimate the Panthers in such a way.
Well, I'll tell you what, you maybe it's a little tongue in cheek, but you were pretty damn spot on. I mean, on your season preview on your season preview blog, I should say, not a podcast, you wrote number 5. The Panthers will go undefeated. This is an exact quote, by the way. So, quote, the Panthers will go undefeated and be the first team in history to not give up a point the entire season. Not only will they win the Super Bowl, but they will also somehow end world poverty.
Yes.
So at some point, in time, they may do that, but not right now.
Yeah, right now, and they have given up a couple points, so I'm a little wrong in that aspect. But hey, man, halfway through the season, 8-0, so I wasn't totally wrong.
Now that brings me to my first question. Now that we have the apology out of the way, and you accept my apology, we can continue with the podcast.
I accept it.
I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. Now, as we said, Carolina's undefeated. They're headed toward the game they should win. But what's the feeling of a Carolina Panther fan? Obviously, you being such a diehard Carolina Panthers fan, you can give us a good look into what's the feeling right now with the team being so good and undefeated at this point in the season.
Well, obviously, the fan base is pretty hyped up. We don't get a whole lot of success here in professional sports in the Charlotte area. So anytime the Panthers are sort of like that's our big hope every year, that the Panthers can muster up some kind of success. So the fan base here is super jacked up on it. It's a bit of a stressful undefeated record. They tend to win games in a very ugly way. They try to give games away late in the fourth quarter. So there's a lot of I don't want to say it's a love-hate thing with our undefeated Panthers, but they definitely push us to our limits as fans, in terms of the way they win games, at least the last few that they've won. So, but we're stoked. I mean, I think it's exactly, in a lot of ways, it's exactly how we would want it. we're kind of we're going to be until Cincinnati or New England loses or whatever, if they in fact do lose, the Panthers are always going to be the third ranked undefeated team. We kind of fly under the radar. People, I think, seem to think that we sometimes win in spite of ourselves. But again, the record's 8-0. We do manage to find a way to win. And so there's a lot to be said for that. It's hard to go 8-0 in this league. So, and they haven't had the easiest non-divisional schedule either, with having to play Seattle and Green Bay, and of course the Colts as well, who, before the season started, I predicted that they would be a Super Bowl contender. Obviously that hasn't played out, but, so yeah, they've played some tough teams and won some tough games. So I think everybody here is pretty stoked.
That's the one thing that I've said multiple times is with a team like Carolina. I mean, you give New England, like you said, you give New England the benefit of the doubt. You kind of give Cincinnati the benefit of the doubt as well. But then you look at Carolina, and I remember and I said this on the podcast a couple weeks ago when Carolina played Seattle, I said, if Carolina is for real, they'll beat Seattle. And I mean, obviously they won, and they went on to beat the Packers, which again, I said, if I'm not mistaken, I said it, if not on air, I know I said it off air. Again, if they're for real, they'll win this game.
If they're for real, they'll be.
And they keep knocking them down. I mean, at this point in time, if Carolina, I mean, even if Carolina doesn't go undefeated, which I mean, that's very difficult to do. As like you said, it's very difficult to go 8-0. I mean, as the saying goes, it's very difficult to win a game in the National Football League, let alone go undefeated.
Exactly.
Looking at it, you have to think that beating Green Bay was the biggest victory so far this year, because at this point in time, if the playoffs were to start today, the NFC goes through Carolina. And just as well as I know that home field advantage in the playoffs is absolutely huge.
Absolutely. Obviously, if you're in the NFC, you don't want to play in Lambeau. There's a few places you just don't want to play. You don't want to play in Lambeau. You don't want to play in Seattle. So, yeah, I mean, home field advantage is huge. And, another thing about getting past Green Bay was huge kind of psychologically, because that was sort of like it was kind of this feeling that, like, hey, if we can beat Green Bay, we've got the Titans this week, and then we've got some divisional games. Obviously Atlanta, we got to play Atlanta twice, but they've sort of fallen off. All of a sudden they've forgotten how to score. So it's like the Green Bay game was really kind of a pinnacle game. It was like, man, if we can get over that hump, every game from there on is a winnable game. So, there's kind of like this feeling psychologically with the fan base that, hey, man, this could happen. Like maybe we don't go undefeated, but yeah, we could be the top seed in the NFC, and the playoffs could run through Charlotte, which would be, just an ideal scenario. So, yeah, I mean, that was just a huge game, obviously. But at the time that they played Seattle, I felt like it was kind of like you said, it was like every game over the last 3 weeks for the Panthers has been kind of the most important game of the year. It was getting past Seattle. It was getting past, Indianapolis. It was getting past Green Bay. So, yeah, now it's kind of like, okay, we've got the Titans. We should win that game. And then I'm not sure of the schedule from then on, but obviously some divisional games. So, yeah, I mean, it could happen. We could finish the season with the best record in the NFC, which would be terrific.
Now, I do have the schedule popped up in front of me because I was actually going to ask you how far you think they can go with this, being the Panthers, because they play the Titans this week, which, not going to get ahead of myself, but knock on wood, that seemed like a very easy, winnable game. They play Washington at home. They go to Dallas. Most likely they'll be taking on Tony Romo in that game. Then they go to the Saints, home against the Falcons, on the road against the Giants, on the road against the Falcons, and they close out the season home against Tampa Bay. At this point in time, what would be your best case scenario for the Carolina Panthers finishing off the season?
Well, best case scenario is undefeated. I think all those games are winnable. There's obviously some tough ones mixed in there. Playing Atlanta twice is tough. Obviously, You got to think that at least one of those games, maybe the game in Atlanta, that they maybe get the offense clicking. Like you said, we do play Dallas. Tony Romo will likely be back for that. So that's going to be a tough game. But again, they're all winnable games. We have a defense that's proven that they can stop high potent offenses. At least in the first three quarters they can. The best case scenario is undefeated. Worst case scenario, let's say they kind of have a collapse here at the end of the year. They might end up with 3 losses maybe. But again, I don't want to jinx it, but
that would
see them, unless they just have a monumental collapse. I just can't see them losing any more than 3 of those games.
I was going to say, even 3 losses at this point in time, you have to keep into perspective too. The cool thing about it is because they beat Green Bay, and Green Bay currently is 2 in the NFC. Not only do they have a win over a couple wins up on Green Bay, but they have that win over Green Bay. So even if they finish with the same, they have the tiebreaker over Green Bay, which is why that game, looking back at the season when the playoffs roll around, that game likely will end up being very pivotal in how the NFC plays out into the playoffs.
Exactly. And, let's not overlook the Vikings up they've been phenomenal NFC North as well. So, they're 2-loss team as well. So, it's like, they might be the team to beat when it's all said and done. Who knows? But, like I said, it was a pivotal game. We got the win, and things are looking good, I would say, for the Panthers. But again, a lot can happen. The season's only halfway over. Injuries happen. Things happen. So
Absolutely.
But if everything works out okay, you're asking for best case scenario. I'm looking at an undefeated year. But worst case scenario, 3 losses if they stay healthy. So. And again, I think 3 losses might end up being good enough with tiebreakers. With tiebreaker over Green Bay, that might be good enough for a 1 seed.
It'd be really hard to ask Green Bay to continue to be completely flawless throughout the remainder of the season, because I feel like Carolina's done enough now to get that 1 seed. But the one thing I want to point out to you, you mentioned the Vikings. I feel like the Vikings are almost like the Panthers in terms of everyone says, yeah, they're good, but we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. But at this point with the Panthers, or even with the Vikings, the other shoe may not ever drop because they may just be a good football team that everybody's underestimating.
Yeah. There's that kind of they're good, but why? Why are they good? It's like
exactly
because nobody really expected it. So I think that obviously the Vikings are probably a bigger surprise than maybe the Panthers, because I think people knew that the Panthers would have an elite caliber defense. But it's just they're just sort of one of those under the radar teams. It's a small market. We don't get the attention that a New England gets, or that a Denver gets, or that a Green Bay gets. Even a Cincinnati, who I think they get a lot of attention just because they've yet to win a playoff game under Marvin Lewis. So they get a lot of kind of attention just from that. Everybody knows they're a good team, but all season long there's this sort of, well, can they win a playoff game thing? So they sort of are on the top of everybody's list of things to talk about. And then here come these Panthers. So it's they're just sort of an under the radar team, and they just win ugly games, and that's like I said, that's kind of the way we like it, I guess.
It's always wonderful when you have the narrative already pre-written, like with the Bengals, for instance, when you say they're good, but they haven't won a playoff game under Marvin Lewis. So everyone just goes, yeah, well, whatever they do in the regular season doesn't matter because the playoffs are going to be a joke. So it's always nice. It's coming from a sports writer, from my sports writer kind of mind. That's the stuff I look at where I'm like, yeah, I get it. But, people can just, sometimes people like to write teams off because of narratives like that. I was talking on the podcast.
Yeah.
I was talking on just the most recent podcast with one of our guys from the Gear Network, and he said, the Vikings are good, and I said, well, but what? And he goes, they've beat easy teams. And I said, okay, but you get the Patriots who beat easy teams, but you don't say, the Patriots are undefeated, they beat a bunch of easy teams. You have to give the same benefit of the doubt you give the Patriots that you give to the Vikings that you give to the Patriots, because good teams are supposed to beat bad teams. It doesn't matter who you are. Like, if you're a good football team, you're supposed to beat bad football teams. That's just how it works.
Right. And I just think sometimes that there's these preseason expectations of who's going to be good, who's going to be bad. And then as the season kind of progresses, the sports pundits tend to latch on to those preseason, preseason expectations, which is, I think, kind of what happened to the Panthers, when I think people forget that even though they had, a losing record last year, they did make the playoffs. They did get a playoff win. Granted, it was against a third-string quarterback, but this is a team that knows how to win games, late in the season, and they do have a playoff win. But I think people wrote them off when Kelvin Benjamin went down. They said, "Oh, these guys don't have any receivers. They're not going to be able to score points. Cam is he doesn't have any weapons. This and that and the other." And then it turns out, man, they're a good team. So it's like, but nobody wants to really. It takes a while for people to admit that, I guess, to admit that they're wrong. And
by the time they figure out how good the Panthers are, they're probably gonna be quite mad it took them that long to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. So I just think that the NFL is one of those. It's a sport where people love to prognosticate, obviously, like anything else, and they like to say who's going to be good, who's going to be bad, and I think it just takes, obviously it's taken 8 games and counting really for them to really wrap their heads around the fact that, you've got an undefeated Panthers team, you've got an undefeated Bengals team, and no one really expected that. So, and you didn't expect Denver to struggle the way they have for much of the season to score points. So, I think people are just almost in shock, of how things play out, in the NFL. So, but I'm okay with it. Like I said, I think I would rather go into a season with no expectations and overshoot them than come into the season with high expectations and sort of fall flat. So.
Now speaking on the topic of expectations, it brings me to my next question here for you. Cam Newton is obviously one of the bigger reasons why the Panthers are where they are right now. Now, as we said, with the expectations preseason and what's actually happened now, I mean, we've seen what guys like Tom Brady has done in New England with the Patriots, but he's going to get a lot of the MVP talk. But do you believe that Cam Newton deserves more of a look in the MVP race, or do you feel that the Panthers are here because of him, but a bigger reason, like you said, the defense being so good or someone else being so good? Is it Cam Newton, or is it everyone else that deserves the MVP conversation?
Well, he's not an MVP candidate. I don't really understand that talk. I mean, there's guys that are putting up huge numbers, and I don't even think he's the most valuable player on that team, much less the league. But what I will say is that he knows how to make plays when it counts. He knows how to, his stats they're not going to pop out at you as being super duper impressive. He doesn't have a great completion percentage. He doesn't throw a ton of passes. But he can make plays with his legs. He can convert on 3rd and long with his legs, with his arm. He just makes plays when he needs to. And then, so I think it's an interesting dynamic with that team. They sometimes succeed because of Cam. At times, I think they succeed in spite of Cam. He's that kind of player. He's going to make mistakes. He's not a terribly accurate passer, but he's a winner. He won a national championship in college. The guy knows how to win. He knows how to make plays. He doesn't let the moment get too big. He's able to perform under pressure, and that's, hey, I'll take that quarterback any day. But I do think that the real value of this team is on the other side of the ball. They have, to me, the best linebacking duo in the league with Thomas Davis and Luke Kuechly. Josh Norman is arguably the best corner in the game right now. So they just have some really dynamic defensive players that are really what make the team special, I think. So, but the MVP talk with Cam is interesting, but I don't really buy it. He's not an MVP type player. He doesn't put MVP numbers up. But again, he's had a great season, and he's won a lot of games, and that's all that counts.
I would have to say right now at this point, just him being in that talk is enough alone. You know, like I said a couple weeks ago that he deserves to be in the conversation, just because I felt like if he wasn't the quarterback in Carolina, maybe they wouldn't be where they are right now. I mean, the defense is damn good. Don't get me wrong, but it just feels like Cam Newton is like the linchpin that helps keep that whole thing together sometimes. And you know what? I feel like I said, for him, being in the conversation is enough alone, because, like I said, you see what guys like Tom Brady are doing. There's no possible way that Tom Brady doesn't finish the season without winning the MVP, because he's just been absolutely incredible this season.
Yeah.
It pains me to say that being a Bills fan.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can understand that. I'm sure you would love to have Tom Brady as your quarterback, but
it would be very nice. It would be very nice.
Yeah, but again, Tom Brady puts up MVP-like numbers. Cam Newton does not. He's got an intangible quality that's not really MVP worthy, but it is. He has that type of quality that you want on your team. He's a good leader, and he makes plays, when he needs to. So, I'll take it. But I don't, even as big a fan as I am, I don't really think he's a legitimate MVP candidate. I just think there's guys out there that are having better seasons as quarterbacks. That's in particular, fair. Tom Brady and even Andy Dalton, obviously, too. So,
if Andy Dalton won the MVP, I think the world would just cave in on itself.
Stop spinning. Yeah, probably so.
Exactly. Gravity would cease to exist. Stuff like that.
Exactly.
Now, if you're just joining us on the line right now, Paul Waggoner, the senior music correspondent for BetterLiveThanDead.com or BetterLiveThanDeadSports.com, BLTDSports.com, Better Live Than Dead podcast, however you want to put it. He's the man with the plan. Now, Paul, your band's seventh studio album came out in July. You guys have been on the road pretty much ever since. You're about to start your third leg of the tour coming up next week. How's the fans' response been to you guys, not only on the road in the past couple months, but how's the response to the album been?
Oh, it's been great, man. I mean, we try to push ourselves every time we write a record, and we did the same thing this time. And we can only, we only hope that people dig it, and so far, people have been responding very, very favorably to the album, and the shows have been great. So we're about to leave again on the tour with some really good bands, Enslaved, Intronaut, and Native Construct, and so we're just excited to be doing what we do and playing music that we're passionate about, and people so far, anyway, or what seemingly anyway, they've been responding pretty well to the new material. So we're excited about that.
No, I want to ask you. It's a very cliche question. It's one of those questions you get when you get when you're on one of those like media things where you talk to one guy 10 minutes, one guy 10 minutes, one guy 10 minutes. It's one of those questions. So I apologize if it comes off as dumb, but I've always wanted to know this. Personally, what is your favorite part of touring, and what's your least favorite part of touring?
Well, my favorite part is honestly probably just playing the shows. I mean, I know that sounds pretty generic, but there's some kind of like I don't know. There's some sort of high that the musicians get, when they play their music in front of a crowd and get that sort of immediate response. You know what I mean? You write music, you record it. Sometimes that process can be very almost narcissistic, because you're just in your own little box and in your own little head, and you're doing your thing, and you don't know how it's going to be received. So when you play live, and you play your songs, and you play your music, and you see people react to it like right in front of you, that's like the coolest thing about tour for me. I just love that feeling. Is really cool to see something that you've done, that you've created have an impact on people. And you get to see it right there in front of your face. So that's the coolest part about it. The worst part is probably just you're away from home, I mean, we're getting pretty old. We're in our mid-30s, some of us, and you're away from your family. You live in a bus. You live in a bus. You sleep in a little bunk, and you just sort of, I don't know. There's sort of this kind of loneliness of being on the road. Even though you're hanging out with your best friends, you miss kind of the normalcy of being home and waking up in your own bed and cooking a meal on a stove, instead of a microwave. So there's just certain things about like tour that are very, and even as long as I've been doing it, there's still that aspect of tour that just kind of, you're just like, oh man, I would love to, just sit in my chair and watch TV, or whatever, just stuff like that, just kind of goofy, like first world problems, what I call. So
it's fascinating to hear, though.
But again, I mean, we love doing it. I mean, we wouldn't do it if we didn't love it. Obviously, there's more lucrative jobs that we could have, I'm sure. But we love doing it, and all the negative aspects of touring, I guess, are for the most part totally outshined by the really cool parts of tour, and that's obviously playing in front of a lot of people who are interested in what we're doing and meeting new people and seeing cool places and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, there's far more positive aspects of it than negative.
I never thought of it that way. It's like you said, it's a first world problem. You're touring the country, you get to go, like you said, play your music for your fans every single night. And at the end of the day, you go, I really wish I could just cook a meal and sit in my chair.
Yeah, my wife gives me a hard time about it all the time. She's like, Paul, you're living the dream, and occasionally I'll be kind of a brat and I'll complain about something. Oh, I didn't sleep good last night. It was a rough drive or something. But she's right. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm doing something that a lot of people would trade places with me, in a heartbeat. So,
I mean, if you want, I don't know how to play the guitar very well, but if you want to switch jobs one day, like just for the day, I would not say no. That's for sure.
And yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I do love to do it. I always, like I said, I'm fully aware that when I do complain about stupid things, I'm totally just being a brat. So
it puts a smile on your face when you think about it, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, when we last talked, you had just started the coffee roasting business. I remember you were just talking about getting things all finished up and getting started. How have things gone in that aspect of your life?
Good. I mean, we do it. It's still kind of a labor of love, it's just a family thing, but, so we don't depend on it obviously for an income or anything. We're just trying to roast the best coffee around. That's kind of our goal, is to just, make a quality product and get it out to anybody who's interested. So far it's going well. We've had a great response from, the BTBAM fans who have like ordered coffee on the web store and they've all, raved about it and stuff like that. And then, we're starting to get a little bit of a foothold locally in North Carolina, Charlotte in particular, where people, delis and markets are starting to carry our coffee and serve it on drip in their restaurants and stuff like that. So yeah, we're just sort of poking along. I mean, we're not trying to really pursue things too aggressively because quite honestly, I don't have time for it to be like a huge thing right now. But yeah, we're just trying to like make really good coffee and that's pretty much it. That's our sole objective right now, is to source, ethically source coffee and roast it in a way that highlights the best flavors possible. So people aren't just drinking, black motor oil acid stuff in the morning just to get a caffeine fix. They're actually drinking coffee that tastes good and that they can drink and actually enjoy it, as opposed to just sucking it down so they can get through the first half of the morning at work or whatever.
It's been fun. It's been from my end, being a fan of yours. It's fun to watch it grow because it's like your music career. I mean, you start off with an objective and you've gone through it, however fast or slow it may be. But like you said, I remember when we last talked and you were talking about how you had just found a couple new flavors that you liked that you were going to sell, and now you're talking about how it's starting to move its way into local shops and local stores. And I mean, it's partially like, again, like with the music, you're living the dream, you're doing something you love to do, and you're just having an absolute blast with it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's there's a lot of parallels really to the music and the coffee thing. I mean, when we started the band, we did it. It was a labor of love. We just did it because we were passionate about it. We didn't know where it would take us. We just wanted to write the coolest music we could write, and let the whole thing grow organically and at its own pace. And so that's kind of what we're doing with the coffee thing. We're just basically taking the same approach, just doing something because we like doing it. With no real monetary or financial objectives. We're just trying to do something that we love to do. And yeah, we're just kind of letting it grow and evolve organically. And that's what's happening. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun to be a part of.
I do like your guys' the merchandise you guys have as well. You've got the coffee, you've got the cups, you've got the shirts. It all looks real good.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
I dig it. I might have to get a coffee cup sometime soon. I don't like coffee much. I like to drink a lot of tea, but I can always
we
use
have
some
a couple
cups.
coffees that drink like a tea. So
really,
they're more
tell me more.
Tea-like than they are coffee-like. Well, one of them actually we don't have on the site yet, but we have an Ethiopian coffee that it's called it's processed in a what's called a dry processed way. So it has just inherently this kind of fruity quality to it. This one in particular smells and tastes like blueberries. So it almost drinks more like kind of a fruit-infused tea or something. It's very light-bodied, doesn't have a lot of that sort of bitterness and bite to it that a lot of coffee does. A lot of people that don't like coffee, they think coffee is bitter or whatever. This doesn't have that. It's got a very like fruity, very light and refreshing quality to it. So people that don't like coffee, that enjoy tea, I always push them in that direction. There are coffees out there that have more delicate, kind of nuanced flavor that tea drinkers would enjoy. So
that actually does sound delicious.
Yes. So, and then we also have a coffee that we have a few actual coffees that are Burundi coffee. Drinks a lot like a kind of a black tea, like a sweet black tea. It has that kind of vibe to it. It even has sort of a lemony zing to it in the aftertaste. So, there's a lot of coffees out there, not just through us, but a lot of specialty grade coffee roasters have a lot of coffees that have these kind of more delicate flavor profiles.
Well, you'll have to let me know when
they're not. Yes, I will. I'll let you know when it hits the streets, as they say.
Yeah, as soon as it's out, let me know because I would love to try that. That does sound if it's blueberry that drinks like a tea, man. I'm already there.
Yeah, you'll love it, man. I guarantee.
I'll be on the next flight down. I'll come over. We'll have a cup.
Yeah, let's do it.
Now, last question. As mentioned, you are the senior music correspondent for BLTDsports.com. So I have to come at you with a hard-hitting music question. I wouldn't have it any other way. And like I said, we'll let you go on this one. I promise you. Guns N' Roses rumors are flying all over the internet and all over the world. Multiple musicians have commented on it. Now I'm here to get your comment on it in a different way, though. Rumors of a Guns N' Roses reunion tour are, like I said, full blast. Now, here's the question for you, the hard-hitting question of the day. Hardest question you're going to answer this week, I promise you. What's going to happen first? Guns N' Roses completes a full reunion tour without canceling any shows, or the Earth gets obliterated by an asteroid?
Probably the latter. I just don't see the GNR thing happening. If it does happen, I think it's just going to be a total joke, man. I mean, I don't know, man. I love Guns N' Roses. If I want to listen to Guns N' Roses, I'm going to go put on Appetite for Destruction. I'm going to jam out because that's one of the greatest rock and roll records written of all time. But, Axl specifically, he just can't do it anymore, man. I mean, he's a mess. He just can't sing like he used to. I think if they do the reunion, it'll be so transparently, bad that it'll be clearly just for the money and just for the publicity. I just don't see it being a quality product. So I'm kind of rooting against it because I love GNR, and that's a huge, obviously they're just one of the greatest, like I said, one of the greatest rock bands ever in our generation. And I almost just don't want it. I don't want to see it ruined any more than it already has been by Axl.
I mean, I'm a big fan of Appetite for Destruction. Personally, my feeling with not being such a huge GNR fan, like you said, I'll jam out to that record any day, any point in time of the day. I feel like that record right there was a reason why they are a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame group or member, because of how important that album was. So like it was cool to see. It was cool to see Guns N' Roses come back with the Guns N' Roses tribute band, essentially, because I mean it's Axl with a bunch of guys. Although I must say, on a side note, DJ Ashba is phenomenal. I'm a big fan of his with 6 a.m. Nikki Sixx's side group. I'm a big fan of DJ Ashba, so I enjoyed seeing that as well. But I'm kind of on your side. Like, I would love to see it because I would think it's going to be a train wreck, and I'd love, if nothing else in this day and age, I'd love nothing better than a good train wreck. But for hardcore GNR fans like yourself, Paul, I would hope that they say, you know what, if we're going to do this, we'll do one show, or we'll do, we'll go to a festival and play a festival, and then that's it. Because we all know, like, Slash and Axl are friends now. Apparently, they've settled their differences, but clearly it seems like there's a lot more there than just let's be friends again and go back on tour because it didn't work before. How do we expect it to work again?
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, if it does happen, dude, I mean, I hope they prove me totally wrong, and I hope it's awesome. And Axl sounds terrific, and the band's awesome, and they put on a great show and all that stuff. But I just feel like the odds are it's going to be bad, and I just don't want it to be. I don't want it to be bad. I mean, it'll be comical, but I don't know. I just don't want it to happen.
It's kind of like
leave it in the past. You're a legendary band. Your time is done, and just let it go.
I just thought of this, but the best way to wrap this podcast up, because we started with sports, we ended with music, the best way to wrap it up is with an analogy. I feel like Guns N' Roses coming back now would be like Peyton Manning still playing the NFL today. Like we know what he's done. You're great. You've proved yourself. You're one of the best. You're phenomenal. Yeah. But what you're doing now, stop it. Just stop it.
Yeah. I could see that analogy, or even maybe like a Brett Favre, somebody that just hung on too long, sort of just thought they could do it, and it's like, dude, you can't do it anymore.
Just hopefully
Kobe Bryant comes to mind. It's like, dude, you've done great things. You're a legend, but your time is up, man. Let it go.
With the Brett Favre one, hopefully Axl just doesn't text a photo of his man parts to anybody, because we don't need to see that.
No, we don't need to see that.
We just don't need to see that. You've done great. You've been wonderful. You left your impression on the history of music. You're going to go down as one of the greats, but it's probably it feels too good to be true, and it probably will be too good to be true. Like, yeah, Guns N' Roses will be back, but it's not going to be Guns N' Roses of the 90s. It's going to be Guns N' Roses in 2015, which no, please don't.
It's going to be a mess, dude. It's going to be a mess.
I'll make sure to keep in touch with you. We can come back and we can talk about this, because, like I said, we'll have you back if you'll let us. We'll have you back to talk music, and if the Panthers go deep in the playoffs, I don't want to throw the S word around, but if they go deep in the playoffs, we're gonna have you back, because, as you can tell by the first half of this podcast, we could talk Panthers for hours.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, and I'll definitely talk for hours if they actually do something meaningful in the playoffs.
If they go to the S thing, we'll talk about the S thing once it comes around, for sure.
Yes, sir. We will, for sure.
Now, before we let you go, Paul, I just want to go back over your list of accomplishments before we wrap this bad boy up. You can check out the blog Necessary Roughness over at metalsucks.net. You can follow him on Twitter at Paul BTBAM. Check out ParliamentCoffeeRoasters.com. Like I said, lots of good stuff over there. And as you said, Paul, there is a type of coffee for everybody. And I'm sure if you heard the podcast and there's not something that sounds interesting to you, tweet him. I'm sure Paul will be more than happy to point you in the right direction. Also, tour dates start back up, coming up on the 18th on Wednesday. Check out BetweenTheBuriedAndMe.com for tour dates in your area and ticket information. I unfortunately couldn't see you guys because I had to work, but my brother-in-law and my sister saw you, and they said it was phenomenal and that I missed out and that I'm stupid because I didn't go.
I agree with them on all accounts.
I'll have to come see you guys when you come back around, or I have to go travel somewhere to go see you guys, but I would be more than happy to.
Please do. Do it, man.
As mentioned, this has been Paul Waggoner. I'm Ryan Wolfe, Wolf BLTD on Twitter. This has been BLTD Extracast number 6. We'll see you sometime soon, my friends. And Paul, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.